The Future Homeowner Show.
Hello and welcome to the Future Homeowner Show. I'm your host, Eric Hillan, and I am excited to have you on today. However you're viewing, listening to this, I'm hoping that I can deliver some value, help you in your home buying process and your home buying journey, and hopefully clear up some things for you. This podcast was created to help future homeowners, people who are feeling the pressure of trying to transition from renting to home ownership and not necessarily knowing what those first steps are, coming up against some challenges, and just need the encouragement and the leadership to make that transition become a reality for them. So I'm glad that you're here. Like I said, I hope to deliver some value for you today. If you have any questions at all regarding the home buying process, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. I want to thank those who have reached out, sent in questions. Our whole goal is to be able to come on here and answer questions that you may have, so that way you're not just sitting in the dark. Hopefully we can shed some light on your particular situation and help you make that transition. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So our first segment is really the pulse of the market. And during this segment, we have an opportunity to look at what's going on in the real estate market. What are the headlines saying? And most importantly, how are they impacting first-time home buyers? So let's talk about a couple articles that I read recently and how they may impact you as you try to purchase your first home. So this was the first article that I had read this week that kind of, I really wanted to address on the podcast today. And it talks about the hidden legal dangers of letting a seller stay past the closing date. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this situation, this is when you purchase a home, the seller is already living in the home, and in your agreement, in your contract to purchase, you're allowing a few days or a week or up to 30 days for the seller to kind of make the transition. Maybe they're buying another home, but they have some time that they need in order to close. So if you're closing on, let's say, May 21st, and you're giving them until June 1st to move out, so that way they can close on the other home and the funds are there and everything like that. What are the potential dangers in that short period of time that you may face as a first-time home buyer, and how can you protect yourself? So this was a really good article. This does come up quite a bit for folks who are, a lot of sellers are selling a home in order to buy a different home, and they have to use the proceeds, the funds from the sale in order to buy the next one. And so this is a kind of a sticky situation. You want to make sure that you're protected. Ultimately, this is happening quite a bit. There's about 30 to 60 days is the window of time that they're allowing sellers to stay in homes traditionally. Now, again, that can change depending on how much time the seller needs. But there's going to be some specific terms that you want to have if you do allow the seller to do this. Number one is you're going to want to have a specific move-out date for the seller. And in contract, you want that to be there. So there will be another document, another disclosure in the paperwork that says that the seller can stay after the close of escrow. And depending on what state you're in, you're going to need to address that document, have your agent write it up. Maybe you need a real estate attorney, but you need to have some very specific terms. And one of them, like I mentioned, is an exact date for moving out. You want to have that as clear as day. You don't want there to be any discrepancies as to, if they feel like, oh, well, you said I can stay here until the other home closes or whatever the case may be. You don't want to leave a wide open window like that when you're trying to get a seller to move out of your home into their next home. At the end of the day, what you have to understand in this process is that you become a landlord. Yes, you own the home, but you don't necessarily have control over the home because the seller is still there. So you become a landlord and they become your tenant until they move out. And so you want to make sure that you have a specific date. That's number one. Number two, a good thing to have in that contract is going to be you want to hold back some of their funds if possible and keep it in escrow until they move out. So it incentivizes them to move out on time or maybe even sooner. So let's say the seller is selling the home, you're the buyer, and they have about $100,000 that they're going to take and purchase the next home that they need to close on the next house. But there's still some money there, about $10,000 or so. And you can hold that back in escrow. So in California, we do use escrow. Again, if you're in a different state, talk to your real estate attorney about how you can do this, a real estate attorney, a real estate agent. But you need to hold back some funds to motivate them to move out. Don't give them all of their money until they have moved out. That'll, again, make them move out on time or even get out sooner. So you have a date, a specific date. You are holding back some of the funds. And then another thing you need to do is charge them on a per day basis. This is called per diem. So whatever your mortgage is, your full mortgage is your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance. That's called your PITI. That is your mortgage. Whatever that mortgage payment is, divide that by 30 days and charge that amount to the seller for every day that they're staying in the home. So again, this is to incentivize them to move out because it is costing them to stay there. So whatever your mortgage payment is, you want to make sure that that's being covered by the seller. One key point to keep in mind is if you have an HOA, make sure that you include that fee as well. Don't forget about HOA payments. So again, you want to make sure that there's a fee there, a per diem, so called a per diem, but it's a daily amount that you're paying in your mortgage. You want to make sure that that's set up. Another thing to keep in mind is that you cannot have them stay for more than 60 days if you're buying on a first-time homebuyer FHA program. The FHA first-time homebuyer program says that you need to move in within within 60 days. So they have to be out. You cannot give a seller 90 days to stay in the home. Traditionally, again, here in California, you don't want to give them more than 29 days because then it becomes almost a lease agreement instead of a license to stay. So you want to make sure that there's clear date. You want to make sure you're holding back funds, and you want to make sure that they understand that you have to move out within 60 days because you're buying as a first-time home buyer owner occupancy. So keep that in mind. When I talk about the 30 days or more in a lease versus a license, you want to make sure that that's clear that you're not entering into a lease agreement with them. Because once you do that, they will have renter rights. And I don't know about whatever state you're in, but here in California, it is very difficult to get a renter out of your unit if there's a lease in place. So you may have to give them an additional 30 days. Sometimes you may have to give them cash for keys to move out sooner. You may have to get the sheriff involved to move them out and evict them. So, you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself and that these terms are there to make sure that you're getting that seller out of the home as quickly as possible. This is a sticky situation, like I said. Whenever you have somebody stay in your home long after you've closed and the home becomes yours, it just kind of opens the door for potential issues. And so if at all, if you can, try to make sure that the seller is out before you close. I know that's not possible in all situations. I've dealt with this situation in the past for my clients as well. And so you just want to make sure that if this is the case, that you just protect yourself, have these things in place, that there's motivation and incentive for the seller to get out. If you're having issues with the seller getting out, again, you may have to deal with an eviction process, and so it could cost you some additional funds in order to make that happen. So these are things that could come up if you have questions about how this might impact you. If you're buying a home with a seller who's already there, have those conversations with your agent early. When you're making your offer, your agent should be finding out the motivation from the seller's listing agent and finding out how quickly they can move out, making sure that things are in place for them to move out on time so that you can have those conversations and you can get these things in writing. You need to have all these terms in writing because if you have to face a judge, they're going to say, well, where's the agreement? So keep that in mind. A second article that I found interesting this week was the fact that home sales are rising a little bit month over month when we're comparing just April to March. So we're seeing that sales are starting to climb a little bit, but they're the same from just last year. And I'll tell you why we're seeing this. We're coming into that springtime leading into the summer. And traditionally, the market just has a natural rhythm. Obviously during, say, the winter time, November, December, holidays, you don't see a lot of movement. People are not moving out of their homes. They have the Christmas decorations up, the Christmas tree is up. They're not thinking about making a move unless they absolutely have to. And I'll talk about how that could be your advantage. But when we come into, the April, May time frame, now we start to see some movement. People are a little more motivated to start making their plans. And oftentimes that has to do with the family dynamics. Maybe they need to kind of get things in line for the next school year. They need to get maybe they're moving out of state, they're moving to another state, and they kind of want to make sure things are settled before they have to enroll their kids in school. And so we do see a natural rhythm, especially in the springtime going into the summer. So we're expecting to see this, but I don't want you to get fooled by this headline. Again, year over year, we're flat. We're not seeing much change. Yes, home sales are going up a little bit from last month, but that's to be expected. Interest rates are still on the higher end. And so even with that happening, we're still seeing the market kind of make their trend up, which is a good sign. That's a healthy market. But one thing that this article does point to is the fact that there are quite a bit of homes on the market and inventory is high. And so how does that impact you as a first-time home buyer? Well, if there's a lot of homes on the market, you have options. And with those options, you have some negotiating power. And so if the market was really tight, there wasn't any inventory, and inventory is just a term we use in the industry. If there wasn't any homes on the market available for you to purchase, then you could be, competing against multiple offers. In this scenario, because we're seeing so many homes on the market, you have some negotiation power, especially if a home has been sitting for a long time. Now, going back to a point I made earlier about, if people are selling in, say, November and December during the holidays and they're highly motivated, they're looking to move when other people aren't willing to move. That's telling you that, hey, they're looking for an offer. They got to make a move. Something is happening. They're not testing the market. They're not testing a price. They have to make the move. So as a buyer, when you make an offer on a property during that time, you know that a seller is heavily motivated. Now, same situation that we're kind of in right now with high inventory. High inventory means homes are sitting on the market. And if you pay attention to the market, you're seeing a lot of prices being adjusted. They're pricing homes down. Even celebrity homes, I keep an eye on like what celebrities are doing with their properties. There's a lot of celebrities that are cutting their prices on their homes for sale. Some are even taking a loss. And so that's telling you what the market is doing. And that actually works to your favor as a buyer. You're not competing against multiple offers. You have sellers who are motivated to sell, and they may be even crediting maybe a rate buy down so they can give you money to buy down your rate. So when you look at, rates are kind of high, you might be able to buy it down with a seller credit. The seller might be willing to pay for your closing costs. So that's, 2 to 3% of your purchase price that's not coming out of your funds. It could be coming from the seller. So these are motivating factors. So I want you to look at this news. Again, the headline is kind of, sales are going up. Well, not necessarily year over year, but month over month, sure. We're just coming into a time where we're going to see more homes sell. But home prices are coming down. That means that things are becoming more affordable, which is great. So there's really some great options out there for first-time home buyers. If you're actively in the market, have these conversations with your agent, figure out what negotiating power you have, and make your offer as strong as possible. There might be some deals out there for you. So hopefully these headlines, aren't fooling you. Hopefully you're getting the right information. Again, I'm always here if you have questions about what's going on in the market. I can fill you in and give you the most up-to-date information just to make sure that things are where they need to be. So every time you're out in the market, every time you're starting this home buying process, it can be daunting. And I recognize that. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and to be honest, they're kind of scared off by either experiences from somebody that they know, or just reading some of these headlines that are out there, hearing about interest rates, and now all of a sudden every influencer is an economist, and they're giving some bad advice out there. So I understand kind of the hesitation from first-time home buyers before they start their home buying journey. And so with that information and having this knowledge of what's going on in the market, having the pulse of the market, I really wanted to touch on a subject and take a deep dive at some of the mistakes that we've seen first-time home buyers make that actually can hurt them more than help them. And with the natural reality of buying a home and the process, again, it can be daunting, but there are ways that you can actually make it harder on yourself. And so I want to address some of these. And the reason I want to take this deep dive is because actually this upcoming weekend, I'm going to be speaking at a San Diego Association of Realtors event. And I'm going to be talking about the home buying process. But in my presentation, I'm spending quite a bit of time talking about the pitfalls to avoid. Because again, these pitfalls, these mistakes that you make can make this process a lot harder than it needs to be. So I want to address a few of these. Hopefully I can save you some time, some heartache, and help you as you're preparing to buy your first home. So, most buyers are hurting themselves before they even decide to talk to a lender. And these are some of the top ways that they're doing so, not in any particular order, but the most common one that I see, I am going to save for last. So I'll address that one last. So first one is deciding to go out and finance something, could be furniture, could be a car, before you actually close on your home. So let's say you're out buying a home. You've done all the legwork. You got your pre-approval in hand. You got your agent working on your behalf. They wrote an offer. You got it accepted. You're in escrow. And an escrow process can take about 30 days. And so the biggest mistake that first-time home buyers think is, oh, well, you know what? Let me go out and buy some furniture for my new house because, I got to have ready to move in, and, I want to have it nice and put these things, start to do this shopping ahead of time before I close. This is a big mistake, and especially when you put this furniture on credit. So your credit is impacted in your approval process because your lender is looking at your debt to income ratios, meaning how much money you bring in gross on a monthly basis has to be compared to how much money is going out to debt on a monthly basis. So that debt could be student loans, could be credit cards, car payments, things of that nature. But that debt to income ratio is also going to include your new house payment. And so you might be right on the edge. If the loan program that you're qualifying for says that you can have a debt to income ratio of 43%, and you're right at 43%, and then you go finance something, furniture, a car, whatever the case may be, and now you're at 45, 46% debt to income ratio, that can actually kill the deal. You won't get approved for that home loan. The underwriter will see it, and they will cancel your approval. And so you don't want to set yourself up for failure. If you're in the escrow process, don't take on any new debt. Finish the process out. Close on your home. And then if you want to go out and buy furniture, or you need to buy another car, whatever the case may be, then take on that debt after you have closed. Ideally, I would love for you not to take on any debt, but I understand there are people who will, finance furniture, or your car breaks down while you're in the escrow process and you need to, you got to still get to work and whatnot. Try your best to just wait till things close, tough it out. And then once you close, go ahead and make that purchase. So, keep that in mind. You don't want to mess everything up because you decided to go out and finance a sofa. Okay. So that is one of the reasons. The second reason, the second mistake that most people make in applying for a home or closing on their first home is actually job hopping. So if you're getting approved for a home loan, the lender is looking for security. The bank ultimately wants security. They want to know that you're going to take on this mortgage payment and you have the ability to repay this mortgage for the next 30 years if you have a 30-year mortgage, or 15 years if you have a 15-year mortgage. So they want to look at your income, and not just how much you make, but again, I talked about debt to income ratio, how much debt you have, so how much of that you're keeping. And then also how long you've been on your job. So most loans will be approved if you've been on your job for at least 2 years. So they want to see some job history there. There are some scenarios where you may not need the job history. Like, let's say, for instance, you finished college, you got your degree, and then you started a new job within the last year. But they can use your college to show, hey, you know, it aligns to what you're doing. So if you got a job in the same field as your degree, then they can use that, and they can kind of have a, you know, be able to explain that to the underwriter. So that is one thing. But when you're in escrow, you're in the process of buying a home, if you were working, let's say, in an engineer job, and then you decide, well, I'm going to have a career change, and I think I'm going to be a football coach, you know, or you know, whatever the case may be, you're going to go into a whole new industry. That can actually impact your loan and your ability to get an approval. So you want to show that you have the job history for at least that 2 years in the same field. If you start a new job and you're in the same field, say you're teaching at one school and then you go to teach at another school, it could still impact you. I would recommend that you don't, but at least have a conversation with your lender about it, because sometimes those things are not in your control. You know, maybe you've been applying for a position and they've taken forever to do interviews and kind of give you the position or whatnot. You know, just have those conversations with your lender. Let them know, hey, I applied for some jobs. If this comes about, how would it impact me? You know, get out in front of it so that your loan officer can explain it to the underwriter and have a full explanation as to what's going on, so they don't see it as a risk. Again, it's all about stability when it comes to your home loan. So keep that in mind. That is, you know, a second mistake that we do see when people are looking to buy their home. And now the third mistake is one that I said, you know, I'd keep to last, and it's actually the biggest mistake that I see. The biggest mistake that first-time home buyers make when it comes to buying a home is that they don't approve themselves. They disqualify themselves. Meaning, I think buying a home is not possible, or I think I don't make enough money to buy a home. You're disqualifying yourself before you even have the conversations. And what that does is it brings about this fear that prevents you from taking that first step. And so my encouragement to you is, you know, talk to a loan officer, talk to a real estate agent that you know and you trust, and have these conversations about your unique situation or scenario. Find out really if you can buy a home, what it would take. And when you speak with a loan officer, even if you got denied, it's not a denial saying it's not possible for you to buy a home. It's more of a not yet. Here's what you need to do. Here's a game plan. So have these conversations. Don't disqualify yourself. Chances are you're probably closer than you think. The more conversations that we have with our clients, we realize that the people who think that they can't buy, or, you know, they had a divorce or a past bankruptcy or whatever the case may be, you know, when we have these conversations, go through their finances and really look at their true situation and connect them with a loan officer, they find out that they either are approved or they could be approved in the next 3 to 6 months. And so it's very encouraging to see that process, but I just want to encourage you not to disqualify yourself. See how close you are, get a game plan, and make it happen. Take that first step. Don't put yourself in so much fear that you have this analysis paralysis, if you would. So those are the top 3 mistakes that first-time home buyers make when it comes to buying their first home. If you can see yourself in any of those, hopefully that helps you. Hopefully that kind of warns you before you make some of these mistakes. But there are plenty of others out there. So before you start this process, talk to a loan officer, talk to a real estate agent. If you don't have one that you're connected with, let us know. We can connect you with somebody in your area. So Hope you got some value from our deep dive today. I'm going to address a couple of questions that came to us over the last week, or questions that we had with our clients, that can hopefully help you as well. So we're going to open up our Q&A portion, and if you have any questions that you want to ask, if you're watching the live stream, you can ask those as well. So first question that we got was, does it still make sense to buy a home with today's interest rates and home prices? So I know renters are feeling the pressure, and it's tough. People who are paying rent, they're trying to figure out how to make that transition. And so they're wondering if they should just wait for rates to come down, if they should wait for the market to get better and home prices to come down. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes waiting costs you more. What I mean by that is, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what this real estate market is going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. All we know are today's current conditions. And so with today's current conditions, if you were to apply for a home mortgage, what would your mortgage look like with today's rates? What would it look like if you were to get maybe a 2-1 buy down from a seller who's motivated to sell their home, meaning they're willing to buy down your interest rate for the next 2 years, so that way you can have some money set aside and you can actually afford your payments, give yourself an opportunity to get a raise and get a promotion or whatever the case may be. So I just encourage you, don't try to time the market. I know it can be tough when you're looking at the headlines, you're looking at interest rates, and you're like, man, I remember when interest rates were 2 and 3%. Well, we're not in those times right now, and there's no telling if we'll ever be in those times again. However, what I can tell you is, if you're looking at a 6.25% right now and you find a seller who's motivated to buy your rate down, you could be paying 4.25, you could be paying 5.25. That rate could be better for the next 2 years, so there could be opportunities out there. Don't try to time the market. There's a lot of people who get in trouble trying to do that, waiting for the opportunity. One thing I can say when it comes to, if you're deciding to hold off or whatever the case may be, I always ask the question, if the market and interest rates change tomorrow, would you be ready? And what I mean by that is, do you know how much you need for a down payment? Do you know how much you need for closing costs? Do you know what your mortgage payments would be? Have you had these conversations with the lender to find out what it was going to take in order to buy? And so you should be having those conversations before the market does any shift in your direction. You should be finding out what would happen, because you need to be ready. Oftentimes, especially when I talk to homeowners who are looking to invest, they're like, oh, when the market gets better, I'm going to, buy a rental property. And I'm like, well, do you know what rental properties are going for? Do you know how much you're going to need to put down? Do you know what a rate would be as an investor as opposed to a homeowner? Ask these questions, get this information ahead of time, so that way you're ready, you're prepared for when the market does shift, if it shifts. So just keep that in mind. If you're deciding to wait, at least have the conversations, at least see if you're ready. One thing about getting an approval in any market is your approval is not guaranteed. Interest rates change every day, situations change, your job may change, whatever the case may be. So if you have these conversations, a loan officer says that you're approved to go with today's interest rates at a certain price within your budget, take advantage of it, get started right away. Don't take that for granted, because you may end up actually waiting and holding off, wait 3 months, and then the market shifts on you and you're no longer approved. So take advantage of that right now, so that way you're ready to go when the time comes. The second question that we got is, how much money do I really need to buy my first home? And I understand that really need question. So, when agents and loan officers are talking with clients, they often talk about down payment. They may bring up closing costs, but there are some additional costs that you need to be prepared for. For one, the first thing I always talk about is your earnest money deposit. We call it an EMD in the industry. Your earnest money deposit can be 1 to 3% of your purchase price, and it needs to be ready to go if your offer gets accepted. So let's say you're making an offer on a $500,000 property and you want to submit a very strong offer. You're going to want to have your earnest money deposit at 3%. Well, that's $15,000. that money needs to be ready to go. You can't have it in an account that, oh, you need to transfer it over, you need to wait 5 days. No, if your offer gets accepted, it needs to be in the escrow account within 3 days here in California. Again, talk to your professionals in your area if you're not in California, but that money needs to be readily available. So that is an additional cost. It's not so much a cost that's going to be in addition to your down payment or your closing costs. It will actually be deducted from that amount. So let's say your closing costs, your down payment, everything together is $50,000, and you submitted an earnest money deposit of $15,000. Well, that'll be deducted from the 50. So now you're just coming to the closing table with $35,000 because your earnest money deposit's already in escrow. So it's not an additional cost, but it is an upfront cost that you need to be aware of. The other additional costs that you'll have when you're in the escrow process and buying your first home are going to be your inspections and your appraisal. So if you're getting a loan to purchase a home, the lender will they're going to require an appraisal to be done on the property. An appraisal could cost you about $600, depending on the lender, depending on your state, those situations. Talk to your loan officer ahead of time about what are the expected costs for an appraisal. But it is required if you're getting a loan. You will have inspections. Some inspections are mandated, some aren't, depending on what state you're in. For instance, here in California, you're not required to get a home inspection done. And I think that's crazy. All of our clients, it's a requirement for us when we're in the escrow process. I'm talking to them and saying, you need to get a home inspection. That's the minimum. There are a lot of different inspections that you can do. You can have a pool inspection, roof inspection, termites, pest inspection. You can inspect for mold. I mean, there's a lot of different inspections that you could do, but that very first inspection should be your home inspection because they're going to look at everything from the roof to the foundation. And if they find issues or concerns, then they're going to say, seek out another professional to get another inspection done. And so that's why it's vital. You're buying an asset, a long-term investment, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to be something that you need to make sure that you're protected over. So if I'm buying a property and say it's $750,000, I don't want to take on that debt if this house is falling apart. I want to know ahead of time what the issues are. And when you get those inspections, just because you find issues doesn't mean that you need to cancel and, this home is not good. That's to be expected. You're going to find issues in the home. If you have a good home inspector, they're going to find issues. Even in brand new construction, we find issues. And so the idea is to know what they are, address them. You can address it with the seller and say, hey, I need you to fix these issues, or I need a credit so I can fix them, whatever the case may be. You can negotiate that. But at least you know what those issues are. You know what it's going to take to fix them, and you can get them done. Now, if there are some deal breaker issues, say there's leaks in the roof and the seller says, I'm not going to fix them, I'm not going to give you a credit, you're on your own, then you have to make a decision if you want to take on those repairs yourself, or you can go ahead and cancel your agreement depending on what your contract says. So you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself, but ultimately those will be additional costs. Home inspections vary based on the size of the home and type of home. So you want to keep that in mind. It may be anywhere from $300 to $750 for home inspection. So that is an additional cost that you need to be prepared for, and you need to have that money up front in the home buying process. So keep that in mind. Another thing that I always talk about is just to make sure you have some money set aside for repairs and maintenance on your home after you buy it. I'm not a handy person. Whenever there's an issue in any of the homes that I buy, I can make a phone call to somebody to get it fixed, but it's going to come at a cost. And so you just want to have some money set aside. You don't want to use up all your money to get into the home, and now you have no savings, you have no funds in case of an emergency, because guess what? Those emergencies are now yours. They're not your landlord's problems, they're yours. And so that's why getting an inspection is so important, because you want to know going into the home that there's not going to be all these issues. Again, especially if you're not handy. If you're a contractor by trade or a handyman, or, you can do repairs yourself, you're not too concerned about it, great. But, I definitely would suggest you still do the home inspections, you know what to expect, and you have some money set aside for maintenance so that you're not delaying those, deferring them out and then going to sell a home, and now you have all these issues with your house. So Those are a couple questions that we got. Again, we're always available via DM. You can message us on any of our social channels. Also, you can send us an email. Our email is contact@homeownerprep.org. If you have questions about your unique situation, again, if you want to run a scenario by us, we've kind of seen it all, so we can guide you in this process to make sure that you're making the right decisions. But that's all I have for today in this episode of the Future Homeowner Show. I truly hope that you got some value from today's episode. Share it with somebody that you know who's looking to buy their first place. Even if somebody's kind of, thinking it's not possible, we want to make sure that we share this information. We're encouraging people to take their first step. Go from 0 to 1. Let's see where you're at, and let's put a game plan together to help you get into your first home faster. So until the next episode, I really hope that you have a blessed week. And until then, take care.
The Future Homeowner Show. Yeah, we taught that first key glow. Let's go. Yeah, savings on the table, dreams in the frame. First time buyer, we know your name. Credit down payment, what's in the plan? We make it clear so you understand. Take a breath, we got you, one step at a time. No pressure, just truth. Now lean in, hear the voice. Your home starts here with the right choice. The Future Homeowner Show.